Going on?
Hey, how are you?
I'm
Jonathan.
good. Yeah, how you doing, Lucas?
Good. Nice to meet you.
Awesome. Yeah, you too, man. Thanks so much for coming on. I've been doing this podcast for a little while now, like a year, and a lot of these people were kind of introduced to me through this process. You're somebody I followed for a few years before I started this, so I've always really liked your stuff. So thanks a lot for taking the time to come on, man. Appreciate it.
Oh, thank you. Means a lot.
Yeah, where you at? Where are you from?
I'm in Halifax, Nova Scotia, just outside of Halifax. Are you familiar
Oh,
with that area?
no, what is that? That's Scotland, Scotland? Where is it?
Canada.
Canada. Oh shit. Yeah, no, I'm not. I feel like you were like outdoorsy somewhere. I thought you were like Pacific Northwest or something. Canada makes sense.
Yeah, yeah. I always tell people if you've seen World War Z, it's like the island or the area in Canada they escape to at the end where no one will find them.
Yeah, I'm just a typical American. Like literally, I don't know anything except for America and the hotspot tourist spots in Europe, pretty much.
Where are you at in the States?
I'm in Cali. I'm from Texas originally, but I'm in SoCal and Newport Beach, so a lot different than where you're at.
It's a good punk rock scene.
Yeah, really? Well, yeah, I mean, out here, there's a lot of bands that came from out here. You're right. Yeah. Henry Rollins is from out here. One of my clients is good friends with him. We had No Doubt. I know they're not like punk anymore. They were kind of punk originally when they came out. They're from right down the street from me. That's kind of what you're
Oh,
into? That's your music scene?
yeah, I grew up playing in a punk band, so a lot of the bands I'm into are SoCal based.
Oh, nice. Cool. What'd you play?
Play bass.
Oh, nice. Cool. Slapping the bass. Yeah, I do a little guitar, not as much as I used to. Do you still play a lot?
Yeah, I just got uh, old used banjo for my birthday, so I'm gonna get into playing the banjo.
How many strings are banjo?
This one's a five string. Um, you can get four string banjos as well, but like I've played fingerstyle, like acoustic stuff before, so I think it's an easy transition, but
Yeah.
like banjo is all about speed. You gotta have
Yeah.
like really good speed. So but yeah, it'll be a fun side project.
I can see you. I can see you playing a banjo. I don't know why you got to look for it. So you're kind of known for combining mobility and strength, trying to, I guess, like I feel like you do a pretty good job of linking the more bodybuilding, powerlifting side with stretching and mobility. What is your background? What kind of got you interested in mobility? Were you doing like yoga and stretching stuff? Did you get into the odd lifts? How did you kind of start to form your framework that you look at movement and mobility through?
So I've been a personal trainer now for 20 years. 2005 is when I started, and I got really into competitive powerlifting in those initial years. So I'm a big strength training enthusiast. Like I love strength training. Really trashed my body doing it.
Pretty
And
typical.
yeah, pretty typical for sure. And just had gotten to a point where I started experimenting and exploring a lot of different things, trying to overcome injuries and kind of realize like my body was not moving way that I wanted it to.
Can I ask you
And
what
we
your
started
totals were when you were powerlifting?
building. I competed regularly in 90 kilos. So I think my best total, nothing too impressive, but uh, would have been at a 285 squat in comp, 150 bench, and 280 deadlift.
And these are kilos
So
for right?
starting kilos, yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
just so people are aware.
um, yeah. So yeah, approaching the 800 kind of kilo total, I think. But
No, that's
yeah,
pretty good.
yeah, it's all right, man. Like I was in the IPF. Like powerlifting's evolved so much since then, and like the growth of unequipped lifting is now like you just see crazy, crazy stuff. But it's cool. It's more accessible and available, I think, to people who just like, want to get into like being competitive with their training. And
It's way
I
more
think even
casual now.
yeah, and I think back those early 2000s and stuff where West Side was really kind of spearheading the lead on it and everything. I think the training itself has evolved better too. Like you don't feel as pigeonholed into like a one way approach to it. And we see a lot of different lifters using different approaches with it. So, I mean, I've gotten back into lifting. There was a period there where I wasn't, and I was trying to fix my body, and I got into gymnastics work. I think that was really what kind of spearheaded that push towards mobility because an old powerlifting friend of mine, he just showed up at the gym one day. I was working for the military at the time, and he had been gone for a while, and he came back, and he just was like in really good shape, and he was doing all this like gymnastics, calisthenic stuff. And that really spawned me to like start looking more into that. He started giving me some books to go through, and I think I was starting to make the connections with I don't know how much calisthenics or gymnastics works you've done in the past, but it's like it's not I think what most people think it is with like, your basic push-ups, sit-ups and pull-ups. It's like straight arm strength skills and all of these different strength skills that I've never trained before. Um, but a lot of it was very limited by my mobility. So there was this whole process of going through a body transformation there that kind of led me into finding a lot more about stretching and flexibility that I didn't know. In those early years, as well as a trainer and powerlifter, like very much was like the don't stretch guy. Stretching's bad, stretching's a waste of time. And you find yourself over time in life just kind of in a situation where it's like you don't really have any other options but to maybe try it out and see if it's helpful for you or not. And that's where I found myself. Um, and it didn't really start with this, basic yogi stretching approach. I found Coach Christopher Summers. I don't know if you're familiar with his work, but he's a gymnastics coach, retired, but coached at a very high level. Coaches like part of his training is very heavily built around mobility and flexibility development. So like mentoring with him and doing work with him was like that big light bulb moment for me where I was like started doing a lot of like heavy Jefferson curls, started doing a lot of weighted stretching, and I kind of realized like I didn't know anything about the development of flex, right?
We
And then
have
you
we have a
start making all those
preconception
connections
like
to
you had, right? As a
yeah,
powerlifter, we have an idea of what it is in our mind, but that's it's not really all it is.
no, exactly. And then you start making all those connections to what you already know with regards to strength training, and then making those connections to it with flexibility development, and that's when I just started having a lot of light bulb moments and just diving more into it. I found Kit Laughlin's work. He is one of the leaders in like flexibility literature when it comes to like developing flexibility for adults. Got into his work, got a lot more into static stretching with his stuff as well too. And then from outside of that journey, I did go on a deeper journey to obtain feats like splits and back bends and all that sort of thing. And I kind of got to a point where I was like, I was pretty happy with what I was obtained. And you kind of get to that point where you're like, well, what's next? Like, I'm not going to become a contortionist here. And, for me as a coach, I think realizing the tools that I had now gained that I could start helping people with brought me to building and establishing what range of strength now is, which I look at range of strength as, a method of training that will introduce you to um, building and developing flexibility in a different way, in a way that's, I think, a little bit more accessible and has less barriers of entry to, I think, what most of the injury has kind of industry has done with mobility training over the years. And I've seen it too, where it's very watered down nowadays. And a lot of people that even come and reach out to me just they don't even really know where to start, or they're very overwhelmed with the amount of content and everything being put out with it. So I try to really simplify that and kind of make those entry points a little easier and more accessible.
Yeah, so a couple questions. So are you're still training people in person as you're going through this kind of transformation yourself as you're getting more into mobility. So I've had, clients with me for I had one couple since 2010, so 15 years, right? So were they able to see you evolve and kind of change your training style and really adapt with you, or did you not have clients that stayed with you over that long-term period?
I had a longer stint working with the military where my clientele base was more regimented to like I was leading PT classes for units and doing like this sort of uh, client-based stuff. It wasn't like someone coming and working with me. It was like kind of mandated work. You showed up and you had to go lead this unit through a run or through a PT class. And I was there for like 10 years. So through that 10-year period where I was doing training for the military, I was mandated to do things a certain way, which is, it's good and bad. Like if you're the type of trainer that likes learning new things and experimenting with new things, it really limited me
Yeah.
to do that with people because there's a lot of red tape. Like you can't teach people to round their back, right? It's like safe back all
Yeah.
the time.
Yeah.
So maybe that was a good thing because I was able to experiment more on my own body, but I was doing stuff on the side. So, after hours, I was taking in clients and I started building that stuff up again and just trying to implement some of the things that I was learning. At that time, I don't think people had like really looked at me as the mobility guy or flexibility guy. It was still just like general strength and weight loss sort of thing. And the online space is really what built that out for me is like being able to, advertise those things and share my training, I think is what really connected those dots to people the most is like then they can start seeing the training more. They can see what's happening and they can start requesting more of the mobility and flexibility stuff. And that's actually, I didn't know that that is exactly the direction I was going to go. But as I was sharing my journey through social media, it was like the realization, like as I was making improvements and like improving my flexibility and like having this body transformation, more and more people were like wanting that. Where, sometimes I was still just wearing that general trainer hat and I still do like, general approach to training for people if it's requested, but um, wasn't quite seeing it at the start. It's like everyone wanted flexibility and mobility work. And I was like, man, I gotta, you know, put this together in a better way and package it a little bit better for people to really get the most out of it. And that's where it evolved to like what it is now.
Yeah, you definitely built a good brand now. So you were powerlifting for a while. So what were the kind of injuries and issues you were dealing with when you first got into the whole mobility thing? Just typical like back, neck stuff. What were you having?
Yeah, like muscle tear, wear and tear sort of stuff. Probably not listening to my body enough, but like preparing for powerlifting competitions, like you're asking your body to do things that you're obviously trying to follow some kind of periodized plan to get yourself to peak up to certain weights, but there's a process to that, and there's always risk involved. But I've had like muscle tears at the quads. I had a partial tear in my pec.
Those are partial tears to the quads.
The quad was, yep, which still a little scar tissue there. I had I don't know if it was a partial tear in my lower trap or a full tear, but a lot of these things too, I just kind of rehabbed myself. Never went and had a major kind of rehab process or surgery with, but it was the last injury I had was a bicep tear, and that I had surgical intervention with, and that was kind of like the turning point for me, where it's like that's not even that serious of an injury in terms of like coming back from, but it was just like I was like, man, this is I think I need to make a change.
Was a bicep tear pulling from the floor or what was that? Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
deadlift.
you know John Quint out of West Side?
Yeah.
Yeah, John's a buddy of mine. He said something that I always think about, always so true. I noticed it too. He talks about how powerlifters, most of their issues are like muscular issues, tears, micro tears, where bodybuilders is usually a joint issue. They don't really have as much of the muscular issues as the powerlifters. So that's something kind of interesting. So I think a lot of bodybuilders who maybe aren't powerlifters, they still deal with a lot of the same issues. A lot of times they live in a lot of extension. They don't really have maybe like the best ability to produce real internal rotation. What would you say is kind of the best way to introduce this population of like the hardcore bodybuilders or powerlifters into the whole mobility world? Like, what's a easy beginner move or a way to kind of start to think about it?
Well, I mean, you kind of did mention the extension part there. Like moving the spine is actually a really good entry point for a lot of people. So if you can start teaching people, you know, spine flexion strategies, if it is more even just focused on the thoracic area and we're teaching people how to like, reach and move their scapula, working our way down through the whole spine. teaching people that these areas to move in is safe and how to actually do that starts to already open up opportunities to move through a greater range of motion. And a lot of those initial starting points when introducing someone to training for flexibility development is initially just trying to teach them how to move their body better. So a lot of those initial stages is saying like it's a safe space to move in. It's safe to actually round your back. It's safe to do these things that you may have been told is not safe to do. And then once you can start facilitating those kind of situations, people already start moving into greater ranges of motion with more freedom. And it's like letting go of this framework that like it's not safe to be there. It is, but we're managing it with certain regressions and positions. So I think that initial like toe touch is a very safe entry point for a lot of people because it's a very commonly used range of motion. Like people are familiar with it. You can start like getting them into moving the spine and stretching the hamstrings and learning how to like work that closing angle strength of a toe reach. So a lot of times I'll start with some kind of low barrier entry like that because you can have a lot of success with it right away. And then you can kind of layer things in around it to take you to the next step. If it's learning how to extend your spine the other way and building that flexibility of the anterior chain, which is super overlooked.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
that was, a big one for me is just like the flexibility of your abdominal wall. Like
Yeah.
I started learning stuff like that, and it's like, wow, like you just never really think about like how much we are never really stretching the abdominal wall and working like flexibility in that way. So I think when it does come to how you might start helping people, I often will look at some of these bigger movements that are just not trained at all. So if it is spine flexion, spine extension, what are the safe entry points to start showing someone this stuff? Because most traditional training models will cover a lot of bases, but like then it's like, these things you aren't doing if it's like just spending some time in a hanging posture and how like you want to position the body to get the most out of that. I'll look for some things like that, but a toe touch is a really nice starting point for a lot of people. Hanging is a really nice starting point for a lot of people because it's just accumulating time in a loaded stretch overhead. And overhead mobility is just like, most people are really messed up in
Yeah.
that area. So trying to find safe starting points for those things is really good.
And you say like toe touch, you're talking about just like a static stretch, just hanging out in the toe touch position.
Yeah, that's a good point, right? Because when people think about the ability to touch your toes, they think of it as like a very quick kind of like, oh, I did it, right? But the thing that we want to instill when it comes to flexibility is like the control time and space that you have to be there. So I'll lay those markers of success out for people too. It's like we don't necessarily want to just touch our toes and have it be like a aha moment. It's developing the quality and the strength to be there and feel like we can control it and own it for a little longer, whether it's like 30 seconds or just learning how to spend time a bit longer in these positions. So it is important to have, and I think that's even just one of the missing keys with improving flexibility and mobility is like actually identifying markers of success. It's like, you know, let's put a performance measurement on your movement. The same way we do with like powerlifting. It's like, can you reach and touch the toes and hold for 30 seconds without feeling like you're going to explode? And, you know, how how long does it take you to be able to do that? You have to do an hour long session where you can do that. Maybe that's what happens at the start. But the big goal of flexibility development is that over time, you want it to take less time for you to be able to achieve that movement. So, you start laying out that kind of framework for people, they can start to get a good visualization and a good idea of like what it is they're working for. And that's very helpful for people when it comes to that as well, right? Is like, what am I actually doing? Right.
Yeah. Especially for
Am I
bodybuilders and powerlifters, they're so used to some sort of progressive overload. They get to see the numbers. That's like an easy way to tell that. But yeah, it's a little harder to find those KPIs like when it comes to mobility, right? So what are some ways that they can kind of trick their bodybuilder brain to get into it in a, kind of like a progressive overload lens? Obviously, there's some movements that'll enhance mobility, and you can just progress those kind of similar how you might progressively overload, whether it's weight or range of motion. But are there any other ways that, like you said, just positionally, but maybe ways that will entice bodybuilders a little bit more to get into mobility?
Um, well, I mean, when you get into weighted stretching, it's good to put some numbers around it. Like, being able to perform a weighted stretch, like certain weighted stretches. Like I like the horse stance as well, getting into a wider stance position and developing that range of motion, the adductors and the quality of the hips, but being able to do it with a certain amount of weight. And
And you're
this
like
is
on your
where
back, or where are you holding that in the horse stance?
well, I mean, if you get someone just holding
Just
it in there
go goblet.
initially, and it is an exercise that you can increase. This is the thing about stretching too, is or flexibility work is like we can increase the difficulty of the movement by where we're placing the weight, whether it's an anterior load or a load to the back, that could make it a lot more challenging and harder to coordinate. And that could be just a measurement of improvement itself, is your ability to execute the task with a different load position. But, you start saying things like 50% of your body weight being held in a horse stance for, a duration of time and hitting a certain quality where the hip lines up with the knee, like we're hitting certain ranges and hitting certain qualities of the hip. That can be quite helpful for people that come from those backgrounds to say like, oh, this is an actual percentage of weight that I should work towards. And where, obviously it doesn't sound like a lot, but when you start getting into these more extreme outer range positions where we're exposing a greater range of motion, it's impressive to see people hit those feats and say like you have not only been able to demonstrate this range of motion, but also establish control with this kind of load in that range. And this is a conversation that needs to be had for a lot of people too that get really excited about training full ROM because full ROM is all the hype now, right? It's like just
Yeah.
train through full ROM, just go through full ROM. And then it's that whole education process when someone starts working with me to say, like, well, what is full ROM? It's like you have to know what your current range of motion is. And if we're going to facilitate a weighted stretch to have you work outside of that range of motion, well, what's an actual safe range for us to assume that you can control outside of your daily day-to-day range? So, educating someone within the scope of like maybe 5% or 10% more range of motion, like within that is all you need to really do to start and to know that, it's a safe space to train in, you can control it, and over time that'll improve. So, more about the coaching, the details than just saying train through full ROM. And this is often also helpful for people too, right? Because when people do get excited and they see those things like train through full range, and then they go and that's how they end up getting hurt because they haven't had those markers of success laid out for them so they can actually think about what that looks like and how that would progressively be built.
Yeah, I use you as an example all the time because there is a huge movement towards really full range of motion, which can be fantastic if you can fucking load the tissues while you're going through that range of motion. So like I use your squat as an example all the time because you see these people going ass to the ground and they don't have the mobility to do it with the weight that they're trying to do with the load set up on their back like they're trying to do. And so I'll
Yeah,
put you there doing the same thing with the same weight, but like looking, perfect. I'm like, if you're gonna do it, this is what you need to do. You got to have the attributes and qualities to do it this way. Otherwise, you're gonna fuck yourself up. You're not gonna put tension where you want. You're gonna get
yeah.
other things involved. What are the main benefits you would say from a bodybuilding perspective towards to increasing your mobility work and this kind of stuff besides obviously injury prevention?
Yeah, I mean, from a bodybuilding perspective, I mean, there's a lot of good research coming out on stretching now to say like when we're in a stretched position, like the soccer mirrors are starting to like lay down some new tissue and starting to get stronger in that full range of motion. So, I mean, we know that that's obviously a desired benefit for bodybuilders to get muscle tissue development through a full range of motion in a stretched position. Um, but I mean, for me, if I was in that situation, it would just be a matter of maintaining joint health and trying to maintain my range of motion. Because at the end of the day, too, you can look at some of the greats and some of the people that compete in bodybuilding at a high level. They don't certainly train like that all the time through full range. They use a lot of partial range work too, and they still get big and have this great aesthetic. But I think that when we start thinking about the long game, it's like I try to educate people that way too. Same with powerlifters. It's like you spend a lot of time training in one range of motion. You end up limiting yourself when you get exposed to this greater range of motion. So I think just even thinking through that lens, like why would it be valuable to me? Well, at least we're getting time spent in that range of motion. So you're not losing your ability to be there in case if that you are exposed to it. Um, but yeah, I don't think it necessarily has to be a be it all end all. Like you should have to train full range or bust. Like nothing else works. But I think certainly through that lens, it just as a bodybuilder, it helps you think about how you might even build mobility into your programming because it is mobility training, right? Like if you are performing a bicep curl on an incline or in a greater range position, there's a lot of debate about that right now as to whether or not it is better in the lengthening position on the bicep or not. It's like, well, who cares? Like you're still train your biceps with a bunch of different exercises to get them big and develop, but I would put that there because now you're getting some shoulder extension work in, and it's a position that you probably never training, and at least we're building mobility work into our program. So I think that's a better sell to a lot of bodybuilders who, as you get older, you may be conflicted with should I start doing mobility work on the side? And maybe some of it would be helpful and building some stretching in would be for sure. But just looking through that lens too is that like a lot of the stuff they're doing now could be made more mobility specific anyway.
Yeah.
So I think that's an easier sell for the most part.
Yeah, the injury prevention is huge. I mean, that's all I deal with. All my clients are people who have pain. And so obviously you can't progress if you're nursing injuries. And a lot of people kind of scale their intensity to prevent injuries. And you never want to have that in the back of your mind. So I feel like you gain a lot of confidence just in your body's capabilities. And then obviously if you're competitive, the posing aspect will be really big if you've got the ability to present your physique a little better. But then even, you look at some of the best pros there are, and obviously they look crazy, they're amazing, but a lot of times you will see like pretty significant weak points on certain physiques, and a lot of times it's just they don't have a full degrees of freedom of their joints, so I feel like they don't really get lines of tension to certain muscles. So I do think it can help overall with aesthetics, but yeah, you're right. There's definitely fucking massive people doing super short ranges of motion, so it's definitely not the be all end all in terms of that. Now, something you touched on that I want to dive a little deeper into is the actual programming for mobility. So there's obviously some moves you can program into your actual workout. How much of your mobility is kind of like that, and then how much do you do like separate? Like, is there a certain point when you're doing a move and you're trying to progress it, some kind of like mobility focused move, and then you have to start breaking down the parts of it instead of just progressing that movement?
Yeah. Yeah, I think when people want to start obtaining bigger feats like the splits or really refine a back bend, it becomes a bit more of a reverse engineered sort of approach where it looks kind of like the flips or opposite of like a traditional strength workout. So we're doing certain movements to uh, help get into better positions or improve the shape or strength of a split or a bridge. So a lot of times specialized programs looks a little more like that, and people like having that set up for them if they're training towards a specific feat of range. But when it comes to mobility specific programs like my basics program, it can be done on its own or it can be built into traditional training models as accessory work is how I do it with a lot of people. So on a lower body accessory day, a lot of the basic movements are basically like, you know, accessory work that we might do on a lower body day anyway. And maybe you have to add a few other things. I like flexibility specific supersets. So a lot of that is pairing, movements that emphasize the length and side of the movement and more of the stretch position paired with movements that emphasize the closing angle side of the movement. So it's kind of creates that similar scenario that we do in a stretch anyway. It's that like relationship between contractions on both sides of the joint, and it has a lot of similar results. And for people that aren't able to actually access a stretch, which is we know that's quite common. Like it's not to say that stretching doesn't do anything, but it technically doesn't do anything for someone who can't access
Yeah.
a stretch because of how poor their mobility is. So oftentimes that's really what the strategy is. So if I get people doing some exercises that are shaped around conditioning them to open up this range of motion so that we can stretch afterwards, so it kind of looks like a traditional, like, do your strength work and then stretch kind of recommendation, but it's built around, okay, this stretch should now be more available and we should feel like we can actually get into some space where we can make some progress. Tends to be a better strategy for individuals that are really limited. um, and yeah, at the start it's hard to give up everything, right? It's like another situation that I personally dealt with, and one of the reasons why I didn't go all in with this stuff is because I didn't want to give up everything. It's like, why do I feel like I have to give everything up to go do yoga or, go do all these things? And it was just constant like trying to find a way to build it in and to do it, which still isn't perfect, but certainly getting better at it. And the more that the message gets sent out and cleared up, like people start realizing, like, oh, I can just kind of build this into what I'm currently doing. It doesn't have to be some fancy 2 hour workout outside that I have no time for. Right? So, yeah, it's good to have strategies. Some people like just doing the program on its own, because even at the end of the day, like when a lot of people do the training I do, they just kind of, they realize it's like it's not really stretching. It's like conditioning. It's like I'm actually having to get myself in shape to stretch. That's a realization too for someone that is immobile. It's like it's not necessarily that, you're out of shape, but you're kind of like out of stretching shape.
Yeah.
So it's like, you know, it can be a good starting point for someone who is really deconditioned and hasn't been working out at all.
So do you have any strategies like for me, a lot of my movement models kind of, based off the compression expansion type of thing where I'll try to program things into somebody's workout that will help get the expansion that I want while they're warming up or even in the big work sets. So from your kind of model, what are some ways that we could like get sneaky and get some mobility training in there with maybe a program that a bodybuilder's already doing, just maybe by modifying a couple moves or changing something small?
With the lower body work, there's kind of just like big movements that I like to get people starting to move in. And you really could think of splits as an entry point of evaluating. So it's like this long lunge position and this long horse stance development. It really is an easy entry point, minimal effective dose approach where if we just start getting that stuff built into lower body training days, we can start seeing some improvements in flexibility in those movements in the sagittal frontal plane kind of thing. Um, toe touch as well, like something like that. Posterior chain flexibility works pretty easy to build in if someone's already doing a lot of hinging patterns. Maybe we build in the Jefferson curl as a focus for that, for developing that flexibility. Upper body stuff really depends on like what the goals are for the person. Like I really do focus on some back bridge development stuff in upper body workouts. So, like I was saying earlier, with the development of the trunk flexibility, I'll tend to build that in. Just have someone starting to work through some traditional kind of ab work, but with that lens in mind, is like we're trying to develop the trunk and build flexibility around there and introduce spinal extension work. That's often works really well in a session. And then just build in hanging that can do like there's so many options with hanging. And, a lot of people will argue, oh, well, if you do pull ups, it's kind of covered, but not necessarily time in the stretched position, right?
Yeah.
So for someone, yeah, someone that doesn't get that time in overhead, what kind of protocols might we be able to build into that where they're, spending time in the stretch, but then also, some of these um, in range strength type exercises where we're starting to like get into some shoulder movements can fit in quite nicely with that too. So, I mean, those four things there aren't that hard to fit into a traditional model of training. And if you start doing that, that's where you could see a lot of wins for an individual is just long, wide stance development, folding down to reach the floor, extending their back, reaching overhead sort of thing. I find that just tends to be the easiest way to do it. And even with some of the compression expansion model stuff, it fits quite nicely too.
Yeah. Yeah. A
Like,
lot of the same stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'll
and the
do that
two.
split stance move all the time with the back foot on the wall reference and try to open up those hip flexors and see how far I can
Yeah.
get them, get that expansion. Yeah, I also like the straight arm stuff that you do too. I think that could be a good thing that would be easy for bodybuilders to throw in. That's what I was thinking. I see you mentioned earlier too. You do a lot of kind of straight elbow stuff, and I see you do some cool stuff for elbow health as well. And I think a lot of bodybuilders they've got little tweaky elbows and things like that, and it's bodybuilders don't do like the stuff I need them to do until they really get fucked up. If they feel like a little elbow tweak, they'll just work around it. So I think a lot of the straight elbow stuff you do, and then also do some pretty cool. What else do you do for elbow health? You do some like rotational work too, like curls with what are those ones called where you're like swinging around? You know what I'm talking about?
Um, well, I'll just use the long bar for some rotational stuff sometimes as well too.
What are like the curls where you were like had the elbow
Oh,
swing in?
oh, the speed, like eccentric speed curls, the mosh pit curls.
Yeah, the mosh pit curls. That's what they were called. Yeah, that looked pretty
Yeah.
cool. Is that something you would recommend, or is that something you got to really build up to?
No, you can definitely start with that. That's kind of like a traditional, almost like a club swinging exercise,
Yeah, that's
really.
what it
Like,
reminded me
but
of. Yeah,
with yeah, like with the dumbbells, you can load it up quite a bit, and you're just building that eccentric speed, which that gets overlooked a lot when it comes to elbow health and just throwing in general, right? So, I mean, it's like one of the first things to go for a lot of people is like, I don't feel like I can throw. Well, if we start building that range up and then we start applying some eccentric speed stuff, excuse me, like the elbows, like that one's a good one. Like even where I do some of the rebounding pullover work, there's these strategies that can, you can start getting someone up to this point where they're thinking about some velocity in their
yeah,
shoulder movement as well too. And that's like that's a whole another gap to fill is like, if we're trying to just improve our function outside of the gym, you might want to consider some overspeed stuff on some of the things you're doing. So like the elbows, like is the elbow getting tweaked up a lot because when you load it up and it's presented with like some kind of dynamic movement, it's getting a little tweaked and you're never actually training that. So that's a good one. Straight arm strength for me was like, obviously I got into that after having that elbow injury and having surgery. And even like through the recovery process of that, like realizing I couldn't even straighten my elbows. Like not even just like the side that I had operated on, but the side that was my good side. Like
yeah,
I actually couldn't extend my elbows. And a lot of people will always say, well, it's a genetic thing. Might be to some degree, but actually spending time training your flexibility to fully extend at the elbow and then loading that up fully extended, that's kind of like a lost art. And even some of the old time strongmen, they used to like that was a feat of strength, just holding weight out, and just showing how strong your whole arm and shoulder and elbow structure was at full extension. Because people know how hard that is, right? But easy to build into training as well. Great for shoulder flexibility if you
oh yeah.
start getting into some of those raises where you're moving an extension and straight arm overhead. So yeah, like that's I think another one. People often respond well to those because they see them as less barrier of entry, and it's like, oh, I could probably add that into my program quite easily rather than doing all this extra prehab work in on the side.
Yeah, I do an isometric hold on my YouTube shorts. I have like 30-pound dumbbells and I'm straight elbow going down from fives and people are like, what the fuck? It's like you can progress so fast in this type of stuff if you actually like try it. And that's another way to, kind of get bodybuilders into it. They'll see the numbers go up quick on stuff like that. And people are like, well, why are you doing that? What's the point? Well, it's not always about that hypertrophy response in that exact moment. I want to get the scaffolding of my connective tissue to be a little bit better. I like holding the shortened position on certain moves. So you mentioned the rate of speed absorption. That's something that I actually wanted to talk about. I know, like, you're a little bit in the FRC world, right? Did you do the ISM model at all?
I didn't do that one. I did FRC like when it first came out. Like
Yeah, you're an early adopter,
I
huh?
don't remember. Yeah, so I was kind of like going through trying to figure a lot of it out in those early years, and I have friends that still go quite hard in it, and I've seen some of the new stuff being presented with like the strength model, those sort of things. So it's like always putting more layers to it, which is that's kind of what you do after you learn anything anyways. Like what's the layer that's missing here that we could build off of a little more? So it's nice to see it develop to where it is now.
Yeah. So what other ways are you implementing? Like you doing like rapid eccentrics? You mentioned kind of the rebounds with the pullovers. Are you doing any like two length really fast ones? What else do they have like the ballistic isometrics at length and range? Do you incorporate any stuff like that at all?
Yes. Um, and some of that ballistic stretching can be found also in like the wushu martial arts stuff,
Yeah.
where like the stretch kicking and that sort of stuff is super fun. It's a great entry point to start thinking about progressing your hamstring flexibility as well too. But yeah, it's like just going back, I really love finding old stuff that's like new again, right?
Yeah.
So, when you find the overspeed training stuff, and then you go back and you're like looking at some of the early years when it was being used, like the rebounding pullover used to be a big one for moving big weight. But if you look through it at that lens and you're like, oh, it can be used for that too. I always like doing that. Like the deep tier plyometric stuff is getting really popular right now, which is cool, but it's been around for a long time. And there's these other
What are the plyos that fall into
um,
that category?
coaches you know, kind of like when you're in like a full range of motion. So one of the
Okay.
more popular ones would be like when you're in a deep squat.
Okay.
You're kind of doing your plyo work from that deep squat position, which isn't necessarily plyo work, but it's speed work, velocity
Yeah.
training in deep ranges of motion. So yeah, I don't know. It's fun to explore that stuff and find those gaps that could be closed and see like when and where they might be helpful and useful in a program for people. I mean, certainly, I think you start to see some rehab specialists start to progress clients to that level, which is cool to see because a lot of people kind of just get put to a certain percentage of ability and they get exited from a program and they haven't really gotten to a point where they have full function or feel safe in their body to go back to 100%, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's cool to see how it's evolving and being used. It's just always, I guess, the lens I look at it through too is just making sure it's in the program for a good reason. Because it's easy sometimes to just start putting new shit in programs and
Yeah.
stack it up. And I'm like,
I felt very
I
guilty
gotta
of that.
close this one.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a lot of what everybody kind of does when they first really get into their movement model and they really get into something. We kind of have to like figure out what's too much and then scale it back a little
Yeah,
bit. Because I definitely was like I'm missing out on some gains because I got a little OCD with the joint mobility and everything, which can definitely happen.
yeah, for
So
sure.
you're 41, am I right? Did I hear that?
Yeah, just last week I turned 41.
Oh, happy birthday. So you and then you're friends with Stranger or Grayson, right? Grayson
Jason.
Strange, right?
Yep,
Stranger Grayson. You guys are about the same age, right?
yep. We're gonna be teaching in Texas next in April.
Oh, awesome. Where at?
Uncommon CrossFit Uncommon. It's called in Austin, Texas.
Oh, cool, cool. Have you been to Austin?
I was there last month for some podcasts with the Coach 'em Up podcast guys, and I just kind of toured around, saw the gym I was going to be teaching at, and that sort of thing. It's fun. There's some good food.
You liked it? You liked the city overall? I haven't been in many years. I haven't been post-COVID. I know it went bad and they kind of cleaned it up a little bit. Things are pretty cool out there.
Yeah, it seemed good, man. Like I had a good time. I was only there for a
Yeah.
short little bit, but there's a lot of good gyms there. I think I went to like four different gyms in the span of like a couple of days.
Are you trying
I
to
end
go
up
like
going
to
to gyms more than
Franklin's? Yeah. Yeah, they've got way more better ones now. Did you go to Franklin's? You trying to see like the world famous barbecue spot?
I'm not sure if that's what the one was called. We did go to a Texas like barbecue spot. I don't remember the name of it, but it was super good.
Yeah.
Um, ate a ton of barbecue.
So I went to this place called Franklin's just because it was like world renowned and it was like I think they opened at 11. We got there like at 8:30 before they opened and everyone's there like in lawn chairs and shit with beers just fucking chilling until they open and then like it opens and it's fine. It's great, but it's like I couldn't tell you if it's any better than any other really good barbecue I ever had. So I
Yeah,
don't recommend making that wait. It's good if you can try it, but I wouldn't camp out like I did.
yeah,
But what
yeah.
I was
Keep it
saying
nice.
is you and Grayson are past 40. I'm getting close to 40. Have you noticed it getting harder at all, or any changes like physiologically when you're trying to improve and maintain your mobility? I mean, he's doing like backflips and all kinds of shit.
Yeah, yeah. He's got like a good background in that from cheerleading
Yeah,
in his early years, and I definitely feel that kind of stuff. I have to keep up with more, like jumping, and like if I don't do that, it's harder to get back into. So I've been implementing some plyometric work. I started running this year. I haven't done that in a while. That feels really good. Like I'd say, if anything, I've noticed like my cardiovascular stuff is like I feel like I want to keep up with that more, whether or not it's a necessity, but I feel like that's something that I'm taking more value in. And I also feel like I just need to recover better. So, I can't crash and bang every day as much as I used to. Like I could, but I certainly don't recover like I used to when I was younger. So I do space my recovery quite a bit. Like I work on my splits now every 2 weeks. So, I've always done it every week, but in the last couple of years, I've been doing it every 2 weeks. And that's just, my body needs that time to recover. I also like doing other things. So, I think it's unique in that I'm still trying to do things that I don't think a lot of people have done in the past as much, or they haven't presented training models with it. So I'm experimenting a little bit more with how you can balance those things. And I'm starting to find a bit of a better balance that way, kind of like a 10-day rotating schedule rather than a 7-day.
Yeah, makes sense.
That's, life, trying to balance everything else out.
What is your personal split right now as far as your workout routine?
Hit upper body and lower body twice a week. And that just there's like a few different skills being worked on there. And
You have like a different focus
then
each
I
each one of
train,
those upper days, each one of those lower days?
yeah, yeah, deadlift, squat, press, bench. Like if you were to look at it that way, that's kind of what it looks like. But then there's like some gymnastics work built in,
Are
some
all
other
your
things like
days,
that
excuse
that
me,
just
sorry,
kind
are
of,
all your days like kind of like that? They're programmed where you throw a little bit of everything in, or do you ever have any days where it's like, here's a mobility heavy day where it's way more moves focused on that?
yeah. Yeah, my spine, I have a spine day. That's really mobility heavy. I kind of
Yeah.
keep that day. At the end of the day, I kind of train the back bridge anyway on it, but I'll use that time to like do some shoulder work and like some ab work and really get into like a really good workout with it. And then I train splits every 2 weeks, but I train two different types of splits. So one week's more like quad hip, hamstring heavy, and the other one more adductor, glutes,
Mm.
hip rotation heavy. So yeah, yeah. As a coach does, they try to tick every box. I really try to tick every box, but I try to do it in a way that allows me to get the most out of every session and not just like get lost a little bit and too much and experimenting too much.
What's the lift that you're most like proud of? What do you think is your most impressive lift? Because you've done some pretty crazy cool stuff as far as crazy mobility.
Yeah, I do love squatting. And I've taken a while to build my squat up to what it is now. Like I never squatted ass to grass like that when I power lifted. I was a wide stance, low bar squatter because of poor mobility. So I take a lot of pride in my squat. So yeah,
Sweet.
that's probably my favorite lift. I'm a weak presser. I'm trying to get my pressing back up. And I love the deadlift even just more for the variety it offers in like recent years, getting into like all the old time odd lifts. Most of them are deadlift specific. So, Zerchers and Jeffersons and one hand deadlifts. And I just love the variety that you can train that in. So I've been really exploring that space. I'm doing heavy trap bar stuff right now because there's a competition coming up. Are you familiar with the USAWA?
Yeah.
Yeah, they have a comp. Every quarter they have like a comp that you can enter online. So the one coming up is a heavy trap bar deadlift. So I'm doing that for the competition. But trap bar deads are fun too.
A lot of people shit on them. They say they're a shitty squat movement, a shitty hinge movement, but I like them too. I think they're fantastic. But what is your favorite odd lift that you've done? What do you think is the craziest odd lift that you performed? I've seen you do the pancakes with like I don't know how much, just even just anything with your arms overhead is crazy. But what do you think is the craziest thing you've done that you actually pulled off?
Pancake Good Morning is pretty tough in terms of like trying to like it was for me. I've seen people do it easily, but it is funny. It's something about that too. Like when you're pushing overhead like that, it like really sets your rib cage and everything in place. Almost makes the pancake feel better. But yeah, that was a cool one. I'm trying to think here. I love the hack lift, but hack lift isn't necessarily as odd as some of the other ones. Steinborn lift is like
Is that the bent one?
Steinborn is when you put it on your back and you
Oh,
run
oh, yeah, you get the squat. Yeah, that
over.
one's that seems to be more popular lately. I've been seeing that making the rounds on social media.
Yeah, that's a badass lift. And yeah, it really humbles you
I don't want to try
because you really,
that.
yeah. I mean, if you do a Steinborn too, like it's gonna push you down into a really deep squat, whether you like it or not. So it's really humbling in that regard. But yeah, there's a lot of weird ones. If you go to the USAWA website, um, they have a rule book, and there's just like so many. One of the cool ones that expresses a lot of mobility from the ground is the Scott lift. I don't know if
That
you've
sounds
seen that, but
familiar.
with a Scott lift, you're in like a seiza, so you're sitting on your heels, and you pull the bar into a zercher from there, and then you get up. So it's kind of like a get up, but you pull into a zercher and you like
From the
do like a
ground?
stand to a
You're pulling the
lunge.
bar from the ground?
Yeah,
Oh shit. That
yeah,
sounds
you're on
hard.
your knees and you
I'll
pull.
put an overlay of this. Yeah.
So that's a cool one. That is a cool one because it does require a lot of mobility. Um, and it really teaches you how to handle weight. It's named after like I guess a nurse that was pulled someone from the ground like that. That was quite heavy in an emergency situation. So that's a cool movement. There's lots of them in the bent press, and that's the bent press is the old time one arm like lever press getting underneath the weight. That requires a crazy amount of mobility. So
Yeah,
I think of
Grayson
the
does
weights.
those pretty heavy, right? I've seen him
Yeah,
go pretty big on those.
Grayson's. Yeah, he goes really heavy on them, and like he, apparently, like I have some books that have things on record to say it's true that some of these old time strongmen used to do 300 plus pounds with that. That's
Jesus
just wild.
Christ.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
just hard to believe like that you can hold that weight in your hand and get under it. Like even with 200 pounds, it's crazy. But that is a really cool movement. It's in terms of mobility. Um, yeah, there's just so many, man. I think that's the beauty of it. When you get into the old time stuff and a lot of the different lifts, there's just so many that you haven't tried. And that's kind of how I spent those first couple of years was just trying a variety of lifts and just like really seeing what value it had. Some of them are, they don't offer much, but
Yeah, that's what
some
I was
of
about
them,
to ask. A lot of people kind of glorify the old times, and there's some cool stuff to be taken from it. But I was wondering, is there some things you're just like, what the fuck is this? This is kind of weird.
yeah. Yeah, like some of the stuff certainly is probably doesn't have much value to like just someone unless they're just doing a recreation lift and it's just for fun. But even the hack lift has so much to offer, and
And that's like
you know,
behind your back, like a hack deadlift kind of thing.
yeah,
Okay,
yeah. So
yeah, I
it
love those.
forces you into like thoracic flexion. So if you're not used to pulling a deadlift like that, it can be very helpful. Gets you thinking about quad drive. Like it really can help. It helped bring my conventional deadlift up in my mid 30s, which is it's already tough enough to stay strong as you're getting older. But those when you find little gems like that, like using those other lifts to help other lifts or just to keep you excited about lifting, it's a fun space to be in.
Yeah, that's true. The hack dead does help transfer over to the traditional dead a lot. Is there another move combo you can think of like that translates really well?
Well, I mean, you can't go wrong doing a zercher, and
Yeah.
the zercher will get you comfortable in flexion too, like doing heavy stuff in flexion. um that was always a problem for me, just always being taught growing up like never around your back, which
Yeah. Well, powerlifting, right?
and I feel like that was like kind of the problem when it came to breaking certain barriers, is that when my back did round, I kind of got really guarded and like wouldn't let my body do it. So, things like the Zercher and the hack lift, they can safely introduce you to that, and build that up in a lot of variety of ways.
And it's good to
Um,
explore from there too, right? Like we don't necessarily want to
yeah,
just keep everything linearly. We can add a little turn in there. You can change the angles a little bit. A
yeah,
lot of times I would have my guys, I'm introducing people that are, like you said, really in their head about back flexion. So a lot of times if I can get them to the point where they just turn a little bit and they're holding on to maybe a Smith machine that's weighted down, they're just applying a little bit of tension from that flex position just to get the brain to start to accept that it's okay to have a little bit
yeah.
of flexion.
Safe space to be in, right? And that's I think that's the key. The bench press, the pullover press is a cool one, right? Like that's the OG bench press. So you're laying on the floor and you roll the bar to your chest and press up. That's a cool one. There's like you can go quite heavy on that too, but it's a fun one to experiment with, right? Because that's how they originally started pressing the weight.
Probably helps
Uh,
overhead too, huh? I think that helps
yeah,
some overhead mobility a
yeah, and
lot. Yeah.
a lot of those pullover variations you get into like they would do them heavy and they treated that like a lift. Like it's a compound exercise, right? And that's where like the argument of what muscles are being isolated is kind of stupid because it's so many different things are happening when you're trying to pull the weight over. Um, but yeah, I think those are some of the major ones. Like the pullover work really got me back into bench pressing as well too. I took so many years off of that after powerlifting because just not wanting to crash and bang my shoulders up as much. But like next thing you know, you start pulling over and pressing, and then you get back into like restoring your health to do that a different way. So I think that's one of the things with the odd lifts is like when you're not relying on a squat rack or a machine to really load up, it really forces you to think about like your organic strength and how you're actually moving your body around the weight. So it's a cool way to even just like, you know, think about how you might do something outside of the gym. What was your body? How would you be able to
Yeah.
use what you currently have, right? So I like it for that sense too.
Yeah, and even if you're like a bodybuilder who doesn't do anything outside of the gym, you're not mountain climbing and shit. It's like just that neural connection, that awareness that you get from doing those kind of fully loaded, full big range of motion movements is going to translate to other movements. You're going to have a lot more awareness when you're doing where you direct intention and if you're getting in potentially a bad spot too, I think. What do you think are some of the most common mistakes people make when they first start trying to implement your style of mobility training?
I think just taking it more like a very soft. I think people approach most mobility too soft and don't train it with enough intensity. So the hardest sell, I think, is getting people to actually train mobility hard. Um, so like if you really want to change range of motion, we got to find a way for you to be able to do that where, it doesn't trash you from everything else that you're doing. But the other question to ask too is like if your flexibility and movement is so far gone that even the other stuff that you like doing isn't going good, what's the harm in taking 3 to 6 months to really go hard and try to do that, which is what I did do, right? At the end of the day, I talk about integrating it and stuff now, which is how I do. But even I was so far gone that I had to go all
Yeah.
in, learn those methods. So I think that's the hardest sell because people kind of treat mobility like yoga. And I don't want to keep saying yoga because some yoga is really hard, um, but just very soft and relaxed. And I think that's the missing point is like when you go in and you start training to improve your range of motion, there has to be an intensity level there that you would probably apply to any other style of training that most people just don't make the connections with. So I think that's the biggest mistake most people make. Like, stretching every day, very relaxed style stretching, nothing's working. It's like, well, you're probably not putting any demands on the tissue to get them to a point where they would have to adapt and actually make change. Um, so I think that's the hardest part for most people. So it's again coaching thing, right? Like it's why it's hard sometimes to like sell a one-off program because then no one ever gets any coaching. And then you don't
Yeah.
ever have that conversation with someone, and then it's just like another like, oh, it doesn't work. Well, what didn't work? Was it like your effort put forward on it, or you know, time commitment, or whatever it was that maybe didn't work? So I still try to keep my programs attached to my subscription because it does offer, interaction.
Yeah.
And I think that interaction is super important for people as they go through that, like, you know, am I working hard enough? Am I doing this right? You don't need like a super detailed, individualized coaching approach sometimes, but just those little checks in the box to make sure that you understand you're working at a high intensity, um, or how hard you should be working and that sort of thing. It makes a big difference.
Yeah, one thing Atlas brought up when we did our podcast is, and I think this is maybe another common mistake. I feel like bodybuilders and people in the gym, we want linear progress, like with strength, but we know it's not necessarily always going to happen. Whereas I feel like sometimes bodybuilders might think they're going to get completely linear progress when working on improving their mobility. And that's something Atlas was saying that he actually ended up creating a little bit of an injury because he was trying to push his bike because he felt like I got here before, like why can't I get there today? But there are changes in the axial skeleton that can happen, or just sleep, or something's tight and you might not always get there. Can you speak on
Yeah.
that just a little bit?
Yeah, new ranges of motion, when you get into them and you start training them, they should be treated somewhat similarly to like a one rep max or something like that. Because once you've gotten into that space, your body gets very guarded. It's very hard on the nervous system to say, like, well, what is, never done this before, and now you're asking me to do it again. We want to structure the time it takes to go back into that space. So a lot of people struggle with that, is like every week they try to push themselves into a deeper range of motion. So we have to put some kind of context to like how we should do that. I always tell someone once they actually have gotten into a new range, is the first thing I say is that probably won't be there next week. So don't be surprised. We should probably scale it like 5 to 10% and, put that work and effort in over the course of another 3 weeks to then see if it's there again, almost like testing the weight a little bit. So yeah, that's a very common when with flexibility, is people want that range. They want more range, but that's no different than wanting more weight on the barbell. You have to give your body time to adapt to that range of motion, and you have to keep showing up and doing the training. So actually teaching someone to actually regress themselves out of that range of motion that they got themselves to at one point is a really good teaching tool, and people will respond better because of that. Usually, yeah, that's again thinking about periodizing stretching. It's kind of
Yeah,
like,
right.
what? What are you talking about? But yeah, if you can educate someone like how to do that, they can have a big result. Like, how hard should they be pushing themselves in that range of motion on a regular basis, or is it every 3 to 4 weeks? And also, that's an opportunity for them to learn how their body responds. Like, my body tends to respond really well on like a 4 week kind of rotation with pushing my flexibility. Some people it might be longer. It's, you're going to take time to figure that out, like you do with strength training or anything else like that.
Do you incorporate a lot of breathing? Like how do you incorporate breathing into what you do? Is it a focus at all?
um yeah, I mean, breathing helps someone be in a stretch, um because I mean, this is like one of the hardest parts too, is accumulating a stretch sensation means actually staying there and not moving.
And being able to hold it right.
So
Like some people get to a
oftentimes,
spot, sorry, some people get to a spot right and they're fucking holding their breath and like they can't like really own it, right?
oh, they keep trying to adjust or move, and it's like you have to actually stop and hold it. And I think the other thing too with that is everyone's always trying to feel the stretch, but to feel the stretch, you have to hold the stretch, right? So instead of trying to go into your deepest end range, go to a range of motion that you can control and actually hold it for 60 seconds and see if you then start to feel something. So I'll often use breath work for that. Is like count 3 breaths in, 3 breaths out, maybe 4 breaths in, 4 breaths out. That'll help people stay in a stretch because then they have something to focus on. They're actually counting their breaths, they're not moving. The stretch sensation's accumulating, then you can walk them through going deeper into a stretch. Um, I've done some, PRI style breath work with the rib cage, getting the rib cage expanding and moving. That's been quite helpful for myself. And, I've presented that for some people as well too, that just getting sticky rib situations or things like that where they just need to start figuring out how to expand the rib cage and get that moving. But that's for the most part, that's the main thing I'll educate people on with breath work, is using it as a form of like a control mechanism within a stretch. So you can get them actually holding a stretch and, not thinking so much about how terrible it feels to be holding it for a long period of time.
Yeah, right. There's also that effect on your like fight or flight response too. If you start taking good breaths, you'll be able to like just feel more comfortable in there. You won't want to have that panic response so bad.
Yeah, you get something to focus on.
So just a couple more, and then I'll let you go, brother. So I used to teach, or I didn't teach. I had a Ken Stretch guy teaching like a free mobility class for my clients at my gym that I had, and I like Ken Stretch. I think that's a pretty good way to introduce some of this stuff to like a group setting. I'm sure you're familiar with a little bit. If you were to kind of incorporate your mobility program with more of a group setting, how would you do that if you were just running a class yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I do like I still like the circuit style approach. Like that's how I program a lot of things. So I probably would have people warm up, and instead of having everybody doing all the same exercises at once, I would have them moving through two or three different exercises as kind of a station with that kind of flexibility superset approach. Um, I find that to be uh, very responsive in terms of like, people getting stimulus and their ADHDs kind of being connected. They're not losing attention span. And, after doing that, I'll spend time in a stretch. So I'll still keep my mobility sessions traditional in that we'll kind of warm up and get into a mobility style circuit and then spend some time doing some longer duration stretches at the end.
Yeah, I like that. One of the questions was the entry level ankle mobility. Is there a movement or something you like for ankle mobility starting off?
I mean, I really just like teaching people to load their feet because I find a lot of the ankle stuff is too
Yeah.
passive. It's just too passive. So, traditional kneeling Achilles stretch, but I will really close the hips so that they're stacked and almost getting that kneeling leg floating. So it's almost like the foot is like really starting to weight bear and take a whole base of support and load the whole foot.
And it's pronating too, which is going to enhance
Yeah.
that dorsiflexion. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's really not like, it's not really a special exercise. It's just how you set it up and how you get the person to get the most out of it. And I find when it does come to like basic dorsiflexion stretches and ankle stretches, people just never load their foot. So yeah, like getting someone in that deep kneeling position, it's quite easy to do if you can really close the gap with that rear leg. So instead of being in a lunge position, bring that rear leg in as much as possible so you're in almost like a shrimp squat position. And it'll be a lot easier for them to start loading the whole foot. And I think too, a lot of people obsess over how much dorsiflexion is needed, right? So that's where they lose that connection of the foot. It's because they're trying to get the knee so far over the toe, they're not actually bringing that vertical force down into the foot you want. So I think just that making like I've had a lot of success in just teaching people that really putting a lot of load into the foot, not stressing out about how much dorsiflexion you get, but making sure you're getting the right kind of dorsiflexion. And that usually transfers over really well to like things like squatting and whatever else they think they want it for.
Yeah, I do something really, really similar. Whereas before, maybe if I was only looking through an FRC lens, I might try to break it down and do everything individually. Where kind of what you're talking about, we'll get better dorsiflexion, but then you have better pronation, probably better like tibia IR as well. Everything up the chain will be better. So yeah, I
Yeah.
definitely agree with that. So tell me a little bit about what you got going on. So you got this seminar you're doing next month. Do you travel a lot for these? Is this something you do pretty often?
Um, I've been started doing them in 2023 and I've been doing two or three a year since then. Last year I did one and I took the year off because the family's pretty busy. We have three kids that are teenagers now and
Oh wow,
yeah, they're quite busy. So this year it looks like I'll be doing two and I'm piecing together a coach's course online that,
nice.
lays out a lot of the things that we've discussed to like, you know, entry level flexibility development, how it looks, and a lot of the different models of it and ways you can use it. So that's been in the works for a while. It's just one of those things. It's like back burner. I've been trying to get it going and trying to balance my life out with everything else. So
Yeah, I can't
um,
imagine. I got three teenagers got to be nuts. I can't even manage with two and a half. I only got my boy half the time.
yeah, yeah, it's crazy, man. And it's just moving into a different phase of life where teaching them life skills and making sure that they understand how to take care of themselves and have
How
some
old are they?
responsibility. 15 and 13. Twins are 13.
Oh wow, oh that's awesome. Are they all boys or what do you have?
Two boys and a girl.
The twins are boys?
Uh, boy, girl.
Okay, cool. Yeah, that's really cool. Are they into like working out and stuff? Do they try to copy you when they see you doing all this stuff?
Well, yeah, I built the the gym you see me training out of a lot is my garage in the back. I built that 2 years ago now. So, I mean, it's just in the backyard. So the kids go in there now and they train and they work out. So it's become, I mean, that was the goal anyway. Like I needed a place to shoot content and train, but having that environment right there, like the kids are in there working out most days and I've been showing them stuff. So It's been a really nice addition to like just the ethos of the family, that sort of thing.
Yeah. Did they just start copying you one day, or were you like, hey, come on, let me show you what this is about?
Yeah, I mean, I took them through introductory stuff. My older guy loves working out. Like, I have to tell him to stop. He's like your traditional bro in
Yeah,
there,
that's when
like
I got
trying to,
obsessed at his age.
yeah, yeah. He's always just like pumping and like just strength training. So he's learned a lot, and he's actually on a program right now because he's competitive in lacrosse as a sport. So I'm just trying to make sure he understands not to overtrain and how to make sure he's hitting the right things he needs to do to get strong and still
Yeah.
excel in sport. But he loves working out, man. He's I can see him doing that for work someday, something physical like that.
It's so cool. Like you never want your kids to like do something they don't want to do, right? And like I wasn't gonna force anything on my boy, but he'll run around flexing. He's like, "Daddy, can we go to the gym? Let's go work out." I'm like, "Yes, okay." I didn't make it. I was like, I don't want him to hate it.
Yeah.
So have you traveled anywhere really cool on these seminars? Have you gone international much?
Yeah. Last year I went to Hong Kong. That was pretty
Oh,
crazy.
cool.
Yeah. Yeah. I did two workshops there. That was fun. Really unique town, like city, like everything's on a hill. Like it's really like a steep hill. Like there's escalators outside. Like it was pretty wild. Went to Australia um, a couple of years ago. Went through the UK. Um,
Awesome. Are you going
yeah,
by
so
yourself or usually going with a couple people?
I've been mostly going by myself. I taught New York. I did New York with Grayson. Grayson's coming to Texas with me, and I have one coming up for Sweden. That would be,
Oh, sweet.
be cool to bring someone up that way, but that's pretty far away too. So
That's really cool. So you've got
yeah,
this going on a couple times a year. You've got, so tell me about your like different revenue streams. You've got do you have an online like app or website? What is your thing in addition to the
yeah.
coaching platform you're dropping?
Yeah, I have a subscription-based membership online, and when you subscribe, you get access to all my training programs and educational resources. I've done courses over the years. I did a mentorship in 2020. That content is available on the membership, and then I've done like other courses like old time strength camp. I've done range muscle, and I've just done these different things that are just on the membership. I run a monthly programming cycle, so people that like the strength training and flexibility, they stick around for the ongoing training, and then there's core programming on there too for like basic flexibility development, those sort of things. So that's been the big revenue stream for me over the years. I've built that up to a point where people enjoy using it. It's got a good training app attached to it, and I've just keep working on making it better and refining some of the things that are already on it.
So you've got your membership, and then you said you have a training app separate. Is that the one where you do the specific programming for them?
Yeah, that's part of the membership. Like when you subscribe, you get that right away. You get access to the member, like the training app, and you can see all the programs and that sort of thing.
How many people are you coaching one-on-one, like specifically doing the programming for? Is that something you still do a lot?
I have like one-to-one is more around, I try to keep that around 10
Yeah.
people, keep a core group with that. Whereas the membership is like when you sign up for that, there's like chat groups and stuff that you can ask questions and get some form review. And you can use it's a little more of like a kind of like a user friendly place for you to
Yeah.
play around and use things. But um, yeah, easier to manage more people that way than like obviously the one-to-one stuff's always
Oh yeah,
the
that's great.
one that takes up the most work.
So once they become a member of your website, then they get access to the app as well, you're saying? Or that's separate?
Yeah,
Yeah, that's together. Okay,
no,
cool.
they get access.
What's the price point for that for you for them?
Membership is 60 Canadian
Okay,
a month.
nice, cool. And then, do you have anything else that you're working on at all? Anything coming up?
That course that I'm trying to get up and running for
Yeah, for
coaches.
coaches, that'll be big. I think that'll do really well because
Yeah.
I mean everybody I know kind of turns to you a lot. Well, I really appreciate your time. Is there anyone else that you think is really good to follow that kind of does the same stuff you do? I know you've done some stuff with G Money. I know him. I think his stuff is really
Yeah.
great.
Yeah. Garrett's
Grayson,
great.
yeah.
Grayson. Do you follow Strong Camps?
No, I
DJ?
don't. Uh-uh.
DJ Murakami. He doesn't post as much as he used to, but he's still very active. I've been following him since I started Instagram. Like
Oh, wow.
he's he's really into a cool explorative space when it comes to strength training. He's always sharing some unique ideas. He's always kind of experimenting, doing little things like that. But yeah, he's a good dude. I would definitely check him out. Um, there's tons of people out there now, man. Like I find new people every day when I open up the feed. There's like someone new. I'm like, holy crap. I follow a lot of history stuff, so I would get like old history stuff coming up on my app. Uh, but no, yeah, those are some of the core people like Garrett, Grayson, DJ, Emmett Lewis. I don't know if you
Yeah,
follow Emmett.
yeah,
Yeah, Emmett is a good buddy of mine. Really, like flexibility development is a big thing of what he does as well too. Strong in archaeology, like he was my mentor. Do you follow him?
mm-mm. That's Emmett or that's someone different? Strongman archaeology?
James Fuller, strongman archaeology.
Yeah, I don't see him. I'll check him out.
He's yeah, he was my mentor when I got into the old time lifting.
Oh,
So
cool.
he does, yeah, like that's all he does, old time lifts, shares stuff every day. He's just kind of like in his backyard, just and he uses old time equipment, just like,
Nice.
shares a lot of different perspective on that stuff. Yeah. So
That's
he's
cool.
definitely a good one to follow as well too.
Nice. Awesome. Anything else out there you want to put out there? Anything you want to touch on before I let you go, brother?
No, that's it, man. It was a good conversation. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, thanks so much. Like I said, I've really been looking forward to talking to you for a while. I really like your approach because you know your shit. Obviously, you've got the knowledge, but I also like how you have some physiological, like intuitive reasoning as well. You know, you don't have to have everything shown out exactly in the study. You kind of put it together yourself, which I think a lot of people in this new evidence-based world, if it's not on a paper, it's not possible, or there's not a mechanism that can make something else work. So I think that's really good. I appreciate the stuff you put out.
Thank you, man. That means a lot.
Awesome, man. Well, thank you so much for this chat. Good luck with everything. Have fun in Austin.
Yeah, I'll keep you posted.
Yeah, if you guys are anywhere out there, I would love to check out you and Grayson together. That'd be an awesome combo.
Cool. Thanks, man.
All right, peace. Have a good one, man.
Dude.